Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years. So in a rare departure from our norm, JJ, I'm going to start the podcast today.
Excellent, I like it.
I'm not sure I do yet. We'll find out. So recently, I started working with my coach again. And I love working with my coach, and I get a lot of heaviness sometimes working with my coach because her job is to bring out the best in me and also to point out places where I am struggling or I'm in my patterns, right?
Yeah. So do those sessions make you like kind of uncomfortable or squirmy?
Yes. Like on the edge of my seat. Oh my goodness. Like, cause I really lean in, like I really, really, really want to always be having more awareness of myself and getting better at my craft for the benefit of others too, since I coach. But I think it's super interesting because last week I had this conversation with her about this need I have to always focus on the positive and how I almost avoid, and I don't even like to say the negative. I don't even like to say that.
I know you don't even like saying that word.
No, exactly. And what's super funny is at the same time I was having this conversation with her, you came to me and you said, I've been thinking about this idea of shadows. And how we have shadows in our life. And I was like, oh, wow, that's a real weird thing that we both had that same, because really we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
The human condition of being up, the human condition of not being great. And what is that? Where does it manifest in your life? All of the opposite of all the happiness. So you coined it as shadows. I really
talked
liked
about,
that.
shadows.
So what were you thinking when you said it?
Well, that's a good question because I was a little bit all over the place with it. Because again, it was like an exploration of a thought, right?
Thinking. Yep.
Right. It was just me thinking. But I thought it was really interesting in the way, like when I think of a shadow, I think of it's like there's light, right? And then there's darkness, and the darkness is the shadow, and you can't see very clearly there. That's
right.
Like the whole thing with a shadow is that the thing, it's the part of, whatever that it's just obscuring isn't in the light. So it's darker, it's less defined, there's less definition to it, you can't see, right? And I was just wondering, are there lessons to be learned by trying to see what is in the shadow, right? Like there's something there. Like if there's a tree and it's casting a shadow on the ground, it's not like the ground's not there. You just can't see the ground as clearly.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
So is that happening for us internally to ourselves? Are we casting shadows, or are there shadows in our own
being,
thought patterns, however, that we should explore?
Yeah. Well, I think yes, 100%. Like you weren't asking that question like for my answer, but my opinion.
Like rhetorically asking you that question. I know what your answer is.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think. Actually, I feel it is such a growth place to be when we can explore what our shadows are. I think it's huge growth. And I think the natural human condition is to ignore and avoid it. Like, no, I don't like that. That's scary. I can't see clearly. I don't know. I don't like this.
Right. Because sometimes where we go right away is that shadow is trauma, right? That shadow is past, past bad things that you don't want to deal with. So you just ignore it.
Yeah. Or you feel it, you get scared of it, and then you gloss over it and try to make it something different. So I think like our reaction to shadow can be really varied, but I think we all have it. Of course, we all have it.
So when you were thinking about it and when you were working with your coach, what was the thing like to go explore those shadows?
Yeah. So I think
like is that like face the pain kind of thing?
Yeah. It's just don't be afraid to face it. Don't be afraid to look at it. It isn't even like face it, because when you say it like that, it's like, oh, that must mean there's a war ready to start or something. But I think that's what emotionally, at least for me, if I have stuff in my past or certain ways of being, like I know I like to be overly optimistic. I do that. I've always done that. And it's made me feel safe. It's like, I'll just overly optimize what this is going to look like, and I'll force feeling good about it. And then it will all be okay. And this will never happen again. And I think her perspective is that when we do that, we're actually putting part of ourselves away. And when we do that, we're not actually fully in our own aware state. We're not able to be who we really are. We're only half of who we are. So it was more from that perspective. And specifically, we were talking about when I was, how this started. Like, and I think it starts for people when they're little, you know? When this started for me, I was raised in a house where it was really not acceptable to have bad feelings. Not at all. It was like, if you're not going to be in a good mood, or if you don't have something nice to say, go away, go to your room, go play in your room. And so I learned really early, it's like, oh, no one likes to talk about that bad stuff.
Yeah.
No one likes to talk about if you're sad. No one likes to do that. So I should falsely be happy even when I'm not. And I think there's a shadow. That's a really, really, really big shadow. And, you know, you carry it with you.
Yeah,
and
so
it
like
morphs.
Or and that tree grows and grows and starts casting a bigger and bigger shadow.
Yeah. And I think shadows are beautiful. They really can be. They really are there to show us all of our oppositions. You know, human beings are complex peoples.
That's really interesting. Like, I mean, we had earlier, actually, I think even yesterday, we had talked about the idea that how our parents dealt with emotion really impacts how we are as adults now dealing with emotion. And you just hit that right on the head.
Yeah.
And so that caused this shadow for you in your, you know, in all of your adult life.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of working on it now.
Right. And I have on and off throughout my whole life worked on it, but never with the same awareness that I have now. So like, I like it. I like that I have this. I actually like that I'm in this place, which sounds weird, but I would avoid shadow forever. And now I'm sort of like, that's really interesting. Like, why is that? What's that done for me? And what is it preventing me from now?
Yeah. That's super interesting. I mean, it's great that you're like open, you know, like you're more open now to exploring it, right? You're trying to figure it out. You're trying to see where those shadows might be and explore those edges. Yeah.
And you at the beginning, like you had some great ways that you were feeling shadows are represented. You were talking about some of those, and I'd love to hear that again, because you started to talk about
my big list of shadows.
Yeah, JJ came to the podcast with, I have a lot of notes.
Yeah, right. And this is like the opposite approach. Like Melissa just speaks from her heart, and I have this giant notebook. Well, when you're talking about your experience with shadows, the thing that it made me think is a lot of times in our professional coaching work, like when we're just talking with employees about being better at their job, a thing we say all the time is an overused strength can become a liability.
100%.
This is almost the same thing. So if you put it into like a very tactical work context, like, hey, if you overdevelop a skill and ignore some of the other things, that causes the shadow. And that's in the work context, sometimes that's more like maybe not even an emotional shadow as much as it is just a skill. But it is, right?
It is an emotional shadow because it's covering something up.
Because you want to be super good at this one thing and you're ignoring the things you don't want to do.
That's right. That's right. It's easier to ignore them. Mm-hmm. It's just easier. It's easier to just turn on a light.
Yep. So I think that's a really good thing for us all to think about is where are we, like, I don't want to say maybe overcompensating. I don't know if that's the right way to phrase that, but where are we like kind of like going overboard on some things that we like to do or we're good at, or we're using it as like a protection mechanism. And
that's a really good question.
Creating those shadows, because I think we're creating those every day. Yeah, my big list of notes, I'll just fire through.
Go for it.
So first I was thinking, okay, if we're talking about shadows, we just talked about this shadows kind of within ourselves, right? That's what I feel like we were talking about. But I was also thinking about shadows we might cast on each other or on other people.
Yeah.
Right. Like and again, this is an internal thing, but the external manifestation of it maybe looks like we act much bigger in order to sort of minimize other people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be a
really
classic,
good.
like overshadowing, like this person was like, I overshadowed my colleague or something because I did something much bigger. Right.
Yep.
And I think you can overshadow yourselves, right? Again, like that's like using one of your strengths, or maybe not so much. Like sometimes you might overshadow yourself in a negative way, right? Like my temper overshadowed my
intention or something.
Intention, right? Yeah, right. So some act caused a shadow. I also was thinking about being in someone else's shadow. I think if you've got sometimes this is like a very classic, I have a overachieving older sibling.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like I'm always in the shadow, right? Being ignored. No one pays attention to me. So that was interesting. And then it's like a shadow cast by an event or a circumstance.
What were you thinking about with that one?
What I was thinking about was, like sometimes I was kind of thinking of it in the context of like a mountain. Like sometimes we're like, whoa, that's a really big project and a really big mountain to climb, and you're actually standing in the shadow of the mountain, and it looks terribly ominous.
So any big goal
and impossible.
Any big goal could go there.
Right.
Oh,
anything.
Yeah, that's really good.
So when you're in that shadow, it feels cold and dark and helpless.
Yeah.
But if you're able to get some perspective, you would just see that maybe it's not even that big of a mountain, and the shadows, and you just happen to be in the shadow.
Yeah. I love these are really, really good examples. And I think like, what's your opinion on this? I feel like the shadows that you feel inside, even though they're manifesting externally, they really are representing some kind of shadow that you have.
Oh yeah, I think it's all the same. Like I was describing this like external, like maybe how we could notice our internal shadows by observing these external things.
Yeah, that's so good.
But all that stuff's internal. Like we talk about how we're making our reality, right? So the fact is that other people and circumstances and and things like that. If our perception is that we feel like we're being overshadowed, that's because we're creating that within ourselves.
You know what's really interesting in this conversation? So as we've been talking, I've been thinking there's a little missing link here. What is that? What is that little missing link? And I just hit on it as you were talking. I feel like shadows are here to show us who we really are. And we consider shadows almost to be like negative emotions, right? Strong reactions to things. If we don't,
or things we want to avoid.
Things we want to avoid, right? And yet, we cannot know. And I've heard this many times, and it so resonates with me. We cannot know extreme happiness unless we've experienced the equal and opposite extreme sadness. So the level in which you can have the capacity for good can only be represented because you've experienced equal bad. I'm using very black and white phrases that I normally totally avoid and hate using.
Well, no, I was just thinking like, oh, okay, so to be happier, I have to go find some extreme sadness.
No. It means the depth in which you can feel something, the depth of which you can feel something. And people will try to numb themselves out, but you can't selectively numb. So you can't, and maybe that's a better way to say it. People, and I'm going to say it again because I think it's really important. People try to numb themselves out, but you cannot selectively numb which feelings you numb out. So you can't numb out bad so that you can only experience good. That doesn't happen that way. You can't numb out only one side of you.
So if you're like numbing out, it's both happy and sad.
Yes. So the shadows that we each have, all of us have them, the amount that you are willing to look at them is in direct correlation to how much joy and happiness that you can have as well. If you avoid these shadows and pretend they don't exist or pretend that you're not bothered by them, it absolutely limits your capacity for true joy. Not the fake stuff.
I feel like we all need to pause for a little bit and just think about that.
You cannot
pause the podcast and think about this.
Wait, let me get my abacus. No, that's not the right tool. Yeah. You cannot choose what things you numb out and which things you do not numb out for emotion.
Well, I really like that idea because I observe that modern society, you could call it numbing. I call it entertaining ourselves to death.
Same thing.
Like people attempt to use entertainment to just ignore everything else that's happening, right? And it's a numbing technique.
It is.
But when you're just in a constant state of sort of receiving entertainment, like you said, I think there's like a finite amount of happiness that can actually bring you.
Yeah, well, it's
actually
more
just suppressing.
Yeah, it's just at more of a surface level. So, we're not talking about the external response of joy and sadness. I'm not talking about that, like what it looks like on the outside. I'm talking about your deep inner core. You can't selectively numb.
Yeah. That's really interesting. That's a great concept.
Yeah. And so like if you look at shadow and what is it there to tell us? What is it there to tell us? If we take that attitude of no, I don't want to know what it's going to tell me. Just hop on my phone and scroll through Instagram. I don't want to know what I don't feel good right now. I don't want to know why I don't feel good. I don't want to explore it because it feels like there's something very big and dark in there. I don't want to know what it is.
Yep.
So I'm going to just avoid it. Well, it just sits there. It doesn't go away. It sits there until we decide, okay, time to clean it up.
And so what's the fear there? The fear there is that if you start exploring that, it's like you're standing on the edge and you don't know how deep that hole is.
Yeah. It's
right? It's like you're going to fall off a cliff and you don't know how far down it goes.
Yeah. It's scary.
Yeah.
It feels scary. But a lot of the times, like just flipping on a light, putting a flashlight towards that shadow, it's a paper tiger.
Right.
It's not real. It's not nearly as big as what we thought it was. And it is such a relief.
Yeah.
To get rid of that shadow.
That giant ravine that you were standing on the cliff of turns out to be a pothole.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. One of our friends, once when we were kind of exploring this kind of topic, said to me, he goes, JJ, you can't know your limit until you see the edge. And I was like, wow, John, that's like a really ominous statement. Like,
what was he inferring? Were you supposed to just like go and throw yourself off of the ledge so you could see it?
Yeah. Well, he was talking about this same topic. He was talking about like understanding yourself, and like until you start exploring what's over those edges.
Oh, sure.
Like you really haven't gotten there, I think was his point.
Yeah.
But he always like illustrates things in such
that John.
ways.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes, that John. Yes, he does. Someday, if I have enough courage, we should have him on the show.
Right. It would be entertaining, I'm sure. And 7 hours long.
Well, I think this is just a really interesting conversation because I think that, you can see people that have a lot of shadow. You can see people who have collected a lot of shadows.
So actually talk to me about that a little bit. Because what I was going to ask you next is how would you suggest we start what I guess we would just coin shadow work?
Yeah.
How do we start this?
Oh my gosh, I love that phrase.
Let's talk about observing it in other people. Are you able to see other people's shadows easier than you're able to see your own?
I feel like I think it's way easier for me. Do you think so for you?
I think so.
I don't know why that is necessarily.
Do I have the courage to tell someone that?
No.
Absolutely not.
No, and nor should
Or how would you even do that?
I don't think it's our job to do that.
Feels
actually.
judgy.
Yeah, I don't think it's our job to do that at all. But I think that if you do it as an observational technique, like to notice, I don't think that that's a bad thing because I always say what you see in someone else, the only reason you can see it is because you too have it.
That's where I was going to go is like maybe if you start observing other people's shadows, you can use that as a clue to where your own are.
Yeah. Let's be more tactical. Let's use a different word. Let's say sarcasm. Let's use sarcasm as an example. There's a lot of people that use sarcasm or sarcastic humor because
I don't know what you're talking about.
because they think it's really funny. And I used to use sarcasm a lot until I had another coach tell me point blank, right in my face, using sarcasm is a way for you to make yourself feel better and to make other people feel bad. And I was like, what? No, I wasn't. I didn't
no, it's
mean
just
it like
being
that.
funny, right?
I just thought that was funny. But if you take sarcasm, for example, sarcasm represents your need to be funny and to make yourself feel better about something, period. That is what sarcasm is. So there's a shadow, right? It's like, so what's in there? What is that that's making you feel like that is appropriate or that feels good to you? What's that about? And I think, again, we always talk about trying not to judge. It's not about judging and making ourselves wrong. It's just being in a more curious state of wondering why we have these things, instead of judging.
Yeah. Well, that was a super good example. It's just illustrating like where you could feel like, hey, that little thing I did made me feel good. Let's explore what the other side of that is.
Yeah. So
Like,
yeah.
why?
Yes.
Because that's a perfect little everyday example. It's fairly benign, right? But it does help you tune
Yeah.
your self-awareness,
Yeah.
right? These are
Yep.
little ways to help start picking up on those clues.
Because, like for me using this example, this was quite a while ago. But I love being quick and witty and sarcastic. Like I love making little pithy, sarcastic comments. And so when this was called out for me, I was like, at first I was actually in straight up rejection that was true. And then I very specifically remember being in a group setting, using sarcasm towards another friend of mine, a girlfriend of mine. And everybody laughed. And for that little quick moment, I had that ego hit, like, oh, that was such a funny thing to say. And then I remembered exactly what Pam had said, my other coach. And I looked at her and I saw it in her face. And I thought, dang, there it is. There it is. Like I noticed, I took the courage to look at the shadow that I just cast and I saw it on her face.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great story.
And I still feel sad when I think about it today. Now I shouldn't. I don't want to feel sad. It's okay. I'm learning, right? I'm learning, and there's that judgment. I want to make myself wrong for that. But I really learned about that, and now it's something that I'm different with, and I understand why.
Yeah.
So I think we all have stuff like that. So to go back to your question, I am not the answer to I don't know all the answers, but I do know for me what worked is to just, when something comes to my attention, just sit with it a minute and ask myself, what's that all about? That's causing some sort of feeling inside that doesn't quite feel right. Like, what is that?
Yeah. Well, this is super interesting. I like that we explored some examples of like really little shadows that happen every single day, and some really big ones, right? That seem like scary cliffs.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that this is a great practice for everybody to just think about and observe.
Yeah. Shadows are good. Shadows are not bad. Shadows give us an opportunity to see who we really are and sort of clean out our closet, so to speak. We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.